Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll get started here in a couple minutes. We're just going to give a few minutes here for people to join as we wait for the official start time of 2 o'clock Eastern. Great to see you all here today. If you like, feel free to add a brief intro in chat, like your name, institution, something like that. And for those just joining, we're just giving it a couple more minutes till our official start time of 2 o'clock. You are in the session today for honing information literacy skills with GenAI, building a modular lesson. And we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Feel free to add an intro in chat if you like. Okay, I see someone, oh no, okay. Looked like there was a hand raised, but it's down, so. But if you do have any questions, just about like technical setup or audio issues, anything like that, feel free in the chat. You can send a message to everyone, but you can also send a chat to host and panelists. So if you have like a technical issue or something, feel free to add a chat there to host and panelists, and then I'll take a look at that. But welcome. We're going to get started in just a moment here. You're in the session for honing information literacy skills with GenAI, building a modular lesson. And we're just giving a couple more seconds here for people to join in. Thanks for adding your intros in the chat. Okay, thank you all for joining today and for adding your intros in chat. So before, good afternoon. My name is Jenny Pannebecker, and I'll be the moderator for this session titled Honing Information Literacy Skills with GenAI, Building a Modular Lesson. Before we begin, we have a few reminders. This session is being recorded, and we have a code of conduct that we will adhere to for this conference. The link, I'm going to post that in chat right now. So the link to our code of conduct is there in the chat. If you experience any issues related to conduct, please contact us via email at genainlibraries@gmail.com, and that email's in the chat as well. Please be sure your microphone is muted. The presenters will respond to questions at the end of their presentation. During the presentation, please post your questions at any time by clicking on the Q&A button that you'll see towards the bottom of the screen. It might be listed under More if you don't have a wide screen. So just click on More to see that Q&A button. By posting your question there, we'll be sure to see it. And you can also upvote questions others add that you would like to hear the answer to as well. When the presentation is completed, I'll read the questions to the presenters. If they would like clarification or for you to speak, please wait until I invite you to unmute before asking your question or making your comment so we can be sure to hear you. You may also use chat to share comments or questions, which I'll do my best to keep track of there, but Q&A is the best place to post your questions to make sure we see them. And you can enable captions by clicking on the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen or under More. It is my pleasure to introduce Lara Nicosia and Arjay Romanowski. Lara Nicosia is Interim Director of Learning Initiatives, Humanities Librarian, University of Rochester. With over 10 years of experience in reference and user services, including information literacy instruction, Lara is excited about the opportunities and applications for AI to support student learning and research discovery. Arjay Romanowski, he, him, his, is a STEM liaison librarian at the University of Rochester, responsible for working with computer science, electrical and computer engineering, data science, and digital media studies. His research interests focus on DEIA initiatives, digital literacy, and generative artificial intelligence. Within the field of GenAI, Arjay has a particular interest in AI literacy, AI ethics, and strategic planning for the technology. Please join me in welcoming Lara and Arjay.
Thank you for that great introduction. I'm going to share my screen here. And all right. And Arjay, can you just confirm that you can see the slides?
Yes, I can.
All right, great. Well, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Lara Nicosia, again, a humanities librarian and the Interim Director of Learning Initiatives at the University of Rochester. Coming from a teaching and learning background, I'm interested in ways that AI can enhance student learning and integrate into the research process.
And I'm Arjay Romanowski, he, him. I'm the STEM liaison librarian at UR. My interests in generative AI do include AI literacy, art, ethics, and strategic planning. And today we're going to talk about efforts in creating modular information literacy lesson plans that utilize generative AI.
All right, so first, a little bit of background. University of Rochester is a private R1 doctoral university located in Rochester, New York. Based on our observations, instructors here, both librarians and faculty, have been sort of unsure of what to do with GenAI. Some of them are embracing it, some are a little resistant to it, some are more cautious or wary. There seems to be a whole range. But overall, so as a generalization here, there tends to be limited knowledge of the technology and its capabilities and a limited understanding of how students are using it. We know students are using it, but how, when, and how effectively. Both Arjay and I have participated in workshops across campus that are geared toward faculty on teaching with AI, and often the presenters tend to be our campus partners in supporting these classes, the writing, speaking, and argument program, the teaching center, etc. The university is really still trying to figure out AI goals at that higher level, again, based on our own observations. Within the library, there's a mix of expertise across our staff. Some have jumped in and tried applying it in the classroom. Some are more in an information gathering and learning phase, and some are less interested or waiting for the landscape to settle. So we have a question for you. We're wondering, have you already incorporated AI into an information literacy focused class session? And you should hopefully see here, I have a Menti poll, and Arjay is going to share in the chat a link to it, if you can take just a moment to respond. All right, so there's a lot who are not yet, but plan to, a few who have done it a few times, a few who've done it once or twice, some where it's not quite relevant. We're getting responses in each of them, but overall, at least as of now, it looks like most of you have not actually incorporated AI into your teaching yet, but are certainly hoping to in the future. All right, I'm going to move back here to my slides. So today we're going to talk about our own attempts to actively build a lesson around AI through a library lens. So our initial proposal was to create a plug and play lesson that could be easily incorporated by librarians into class sessions. So this plug and play model works well because we have a lesson plan repository project that recently was completed at our institution within the library. The project provides an existing internal structure and sharing mechanism for lessons with broad appeal, and has been used for things such as lessons on data and digital literacy in the past. So the idea is that these lessons are things that can be taught by any staff member, with the intranet that we have providing a core information on how to actually run and use these lessons, as well as all the supporting material. So our hope was to kind of create these plug and play activities that could sit in this shared repository that we have and be kind of librarian neutral. We also were hoping to tie these activities to information literacy goals and the framework as a gateway for staff to incorporate AI in a manner that was comfortable for them. So our design philosophy was to build these information literacy activities, but to build them through the lens of AI. So in actuality, we're creating lessons around information literacy learning outcomes, and AI is the tool to help meet those learning goals. So it's about AI being used to understand information literacy instead of information literacy being used to understand AI, at least for these modules that we're going to talk about today. We wanted our lessons to be modular, this plug and play idea, in that they can slip into all sorts of different classes and workshops. They're strictly these activities. They're not the full entire lesson. Cross-disciplinary, require minimal expertise from both the instructor and the students, and be short and easy to plug in. They're designed to be integrated into larger lessons as active learning exercises, not necessarily the sole content. And we wanted to really make this something that, while RJ and I designed it, was built kind of based off of the feedback from all the liaisons. So we had opportunities to collect feedback from our colleagues, and we plan to revisit the activities with colleagues once we're at the final stage before they're deployed as the final iteration. So the focus of our lesson was on information literacy competencies, but we also wanted to build our users' digital technology skills as well. Information literacy is a natural part of digital literacy, but there are also some other frameworks out there that are specific to digital literacy. There's a lot of overlap around these frameworks. These are just two that I pulled out for this presentation, but the ISTE standards for students emphasizes the need to empower learners to be able to choose and use technologies and then transfer that to their own applications. And similarly, the DigComp 2.2 framework from the EU talks about digitally literate individuals being able to select and use digital tools to solve problems. So from this, we hoped that in addition to the ACRL framework goals, students would be able to, after these activities, build their own digital literacy skills of being able to identify and evaluate potential applications for an AI tool in the research process by actively engaging with an LLM and reflecting on the experience.
We began by working on our lesson plans, by individually working through the ACRL framework for information literacy frame by frame. We looked for which frames worked best with generative AI pedagogically. So we whittled down our frames by identifying the knowledge practices, the demonstrable techniques that we paired with dispositions, the attitudes we wanted learners to take away. Interestingly, we both often identified the same frames, but for varying reasons. After considerable debate, we narrowed down our chosen frames for our first lessons to authorities constructed and contextual, research as inquiry, and searching as strategic exploration. Slide. In our original planning, we decided on one lesson per frame, but we decided to streamline it down to 2 total lesson plans as we identified major overlap. We then used the previously identified paired practice dispositions from each frame to establish accessible, logical learning outcomes. I want to emphasize we iterated a lot of these learning outcomes. We worked in tandem to design them with the actual lesson activity itself, but I kind of lost count of the number of times we doubled back and reworked little parts of the process. Part of the initial difficulty was selecting a tool to use in the activity itself. So there are a few barriers that we'd already discovered while trying to work with this technology in the classroom. The first, accessibility, is one of the most important. Having students create, say, an OpenAI account and log in before the lesson begins can not only be a really heavy lift, it's a major time sink. Microsoft Copilot can restrict the number of interactions with the model. There are other open access, no login alternatives available, for instance, Hugging Face, but these are of varying quality. Claude and ChatGPT are vastly superior to Hugging Face, and I've personally had very bad luck with Copilot. Finally, of course, the random nature of generative AI tools can throw a wrench into any lesson plan. So the solution came from a workshop we attended, headed up by Yu Jung Han, a postdoc at the University of Rochester's Warner School of Education. She pointed us towards the AI pedagogy project run by MetLab at Harvard. This tool is powered by the most recent version of ChatGPT, so that's ChatGPT 4.0. It's open access and it requires no login. That being said, all of these plans are tool neutral. An instructor doesn't need to use the project. You can use a tool of their choice. Copilot, Claude, Hugging Face all work. Our first iterations involved numerous methods of assessment. Physical handouts for reflection were created for attendees to focus their thoughts. We did include Padlet and a final submission form that could be created in LibWizard or Google Forms, mostly because my students personally respond better to anonymous online submissions rather than speaking out loud or group work in class. We took these first drafts to a focus group of 6 liaison librarians. These are the librarians we designed the lesson plans for. Each of them had ample experience designing information literacy workshops, and they have experience working with the framework. As a result of our feedback, we pivoted to multiple submission forms created in Qualtrics, which you can also create in LibGuides for multiple reasons. There are a lot of benefits to switching to this style, and we'll talk about them later. But for the purposes of assessment, they keep attendee responses, so you can use them for later assessment purposes.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about each lesson that we came up with a quick note that we plan to share links to our activities at the end of the presentation. The first activity that we have, we dubbed Close Encounters of the AI Kind, and you should be able to see as we go through why that's the case. This activity was designed to meet elements from 2 frames that often pair well together, research as inquiry and searching as strategic exploration. We'll discuss the structure in just a bit, but the main goal behind the lesson was to help students think about strategies for choosing and refining a research topic. We often emphasize in classes that selecting and refining a topic is part of the larger research process, and we wanted to use AI to help demonstrate how this is an important aspect when starting with any type of research project for a class. From an AI standpoint, we wanted students to engage with an LLM and reflect on its potential uses alongside other brainstorming strategies that one might try. So real quick, for research as inquiry, we chose the knowledge practice of breaking complex questions into simple ones or scoping your topic, and the disposition of using open-ended exploration and engagement with information. So in order to meet these frames, the idea was that students will take a complex research question and narrow the scope and focus by utilizing 3 different brainstorming strategies, including engaging with an LLM to refine their proposed topic. For searching as strategic exploration, we chose the knowledge practice of utilizing divergent thinking, i.e. brainstorming, as part of the search process, and the disposition of understanding that first attempts may not always produce adequate results. The idea here was to demonstrate how early searching can continue to help with brainstorming and topic refinement, while also starting to introduce the search process. So to do this, students will use divergent thinking to develop and refine a research topic by engaging an LLM as a thought partner, a phrase we often use in our library, to refine their own thinking and brainstorm possible keywords. participants will reflect on the effectiveness of first searches by conducting a search in the library's discovery system and responding to a discussion question about the relevance of their search results. This activity is a good example of how this lesson is really meant to be plug and play. The activity would likely be followed by a discussion and practice of next steps. How do you move from your first attempts at searching to more relevant, refined selection of sources? But the activity that we specifically designed with the LLM at this point was really strictly tied to the topic development piece rather than the actual search strategies. All right. So again, I'll show an aspect of the lesson in a moment, but we wanted to show some of the feedback from our initial demonstration to our liaison peers. And that's because the activity has really evolved since we first received this feedback. So librarians found the activity that we generated to be useful in that they thought it was useful to have an AI as a thought partner, as well as an opportunity to generate keywords for the exercise. Initially, we wanted participants to type their prompts into the system so that they would actually have to read what they were submitting. But we realized quickly that this led to a lot of technical issues and time management challenges. And so we ended up switching gears to more of a copy and paste method and trying to balance out those needs. Librarians felt the initial lesson had too many steps and the individuals moved forward at different paces, which became challenging, but overall they felt like there was value in the content. So since receiving this feedback, we've adapted the lesson to an online module that can be completed asynchronously or presented synchronously as an in-class or group activity. In doing so, this helped us streamline the activity and reduce the number of steps while also pacing our participants. And again, I will share the activity at the end for you to see it in whole, but I will give you kind of the structure of it now and walk through a piece of it. So the activity was designed where students would start by watching a video, a very short video, and then brainstorm a topic and some keywords based on the video and their prior knowledge. Next, they would chat with an LLM, in this case, ChatGPT, and ask the tool for some different keywords. Then they would develop their own list of search terms and reflect on the activity and its usefulness at each step. So things to know. For this activity, as I mentioned, we provided students with the prompts. This is not designed to be a prompt writing exercise. It's about reflecting on and refining a research topic. And so we decided that it was better to give them strong prompts from the beginning so that we can get at what the actual intended learning outcome was. We also pre-selected a fun topic, as we've dubbed it. So in this case, it was the existence of alien life, hence the close encounters of the AI kind. But the topic and content is meant to be interchangeable. So librarians can use any video or topic thread that they wish relevant to the class or workshop that they're teaching. All right, so one piece of this activity was to engage the LLM as a thought partner. So I just wanted to kind of go through what this looked like a little bit and show how the engagement with the tool actually worked. So here's an example from my own conversation. Caveat, I know very little about the search for alien life. So I think in some ways I served as a good example of how ChatGPT might help me flesh out my own ideas. RJ and I spent a fair amount of time workshopping our prompts with lots of trial and error. And with more testing, these might evolve even further. The first thing you'll notice is that my prompt, which the activity was providing, asks ChatGPT to ask me about my interests in the topic. This was important to us because we really wanted this to be about the student's own thinking, not the LLM providing information or expertise. And so we really kind of honed in on this focus on what my individual interests are in this space. We also needed to add in a wait for me to respond clause so that questions would come one at a time. So it would generate more of this conversation than coming as a single bulleted list. So you can see I asked my initial prompt here, and ChatGPT responded again, asking me, well, what sparked your interest in this topic? So it kind of got me thinking a little bit more about where I was going with it. So I responded about the very little I knew about Mars. And the first thing that happens is that ChatGPT gives me some positive reinforcement. So there's, of course, a reason why it's designed to do this from a technology and marketing side. But for building student confidence, the validation can be helpful. After this enthusiastic definitely, the LLM goes back to asking me about my interests in this particular topic. So I thought a little further, and I remembered something that I read a while back about water and the existence of life on Mars. And so I throw that in there, and the tool once again provides me with some more positive reinforcement. But now it switches to asking me why I think that's important. Like, why did you bring that up? What is it about it that's speaking to you? It doesn't tell me why water is critical. It asks me how I think it might be important, pulling in from my previous response. So I think about it and I respond. I felt like I was taking a test a little bit at this point. It accepts my response, and then it encourages me to think about some other factors. So I'm prompting it for questions, but at the same time, it's prompting me about the topic to help me flesh out my own ideas. So now I'm challenging myself to think about what factors could influence Mars' ability to sustain life. And the LLM reinforces my idea, but now it's starting to give me some language that I was missing. So the concept, temperature, breathable air, that came from my own thought process. But ChatGPT here is helping to give me the right terms and the framing. It gives me things like atmosphere composition instead of breathable air. So to me, this is one of its strengths. It's giving me some of the keys to help me enter the more scholarly conversation about this topic based on my own interest in thinking, despite the fact that I'm still a novice in this space. And here's our last prompt. It has another do you think type response from ChatGPT. But the LLM, if you look at this response at the bottom, is really starting to feed me some information. And so this was one of the factors in the activity. We limit this engagement to 5 questions. Some of it is a time issue. We want to make sure that the activity is contained within a certain time frame, but we're also really trying to avoid dipping into too much of the actual topic development from the LLM. We really wanted the topic development to come from the student. So in this next part of the exercise, the students are asked to refine their topic and then use ChatGPT to generate some keywords. So here my topic has become more specific based on the conversation I just had. Now I'm talking about the impact of water. With this next part, remember, the goal was not keyword generation. It's about topic refinement and brainstorming. So we're asking it to generate keywords through that lens. If we wanted high quality refined keywords, we might need to tweak the prompt a little bit. But this gives us some language to think about and start piecing together the concepts that I might need to search for. It's also giving me some of the technical jargon that I might be missing. To this end, students are then asked to have the LLM define a term that is maybe new or unclear. And then they're asked to choose at least one keyword or phrase from the LLM and 2 other keywords from the LLM or their own self-generated list and do a search in our discovery layer. So for example, here I may have chosen something like biosignatures, which is a term I hadn't heard before, but based on the description, I can see that it might be relevant for my topic. So maybe I search for biosignatures, Mars, and aliens. Again, this is only a piece of the activity. There would then be more discussion about things like Boolean searching and things along those lines, but within the confines of this activity, this is kind of where the keywords led. And we'll share more in a bit, but now RJ is going to talk a little bit about activity number 2.
All right, so for lesson number 2, Lights, Camera, AI. We picked a frame authorities constructed and contextual. So here we opted to have learners ask the large language model several questions about their favorite movie, then sit back and compare their knowledge of what the LLM thinks and knows. Picking a movie was intentional. We wanted to give students a work that they were familiar and comfortable with, which can help with analyzing the responses and ultimately demystifying the technology. In short, they can quickly see its strengths and limitations when seen through the lens of their favorite movie. So for this portion of my examples, I'll be giving one from my favorite movie, one of my favorite movies, Mad Max Fury Road.
Sorry, RJ. Yes.
Oh, no worries. Here's our paired practices and dispositions, which leads us to our learning outcome. Participants will recognize that information is impacted by personal biases and the biases of others, e.g. authors, by asking questions of a large language model about a familiar topic, film, and reflecting on the validity of the responses. So again, we are going to show our focus group results first because it has changed after the focus group went through. The focus group all thought that the exercise was fun, straightforward, and engaging, but they were split about the applicability to their classes, particularly in a hybrid environment. There were thoughts about adapting it to the relevant coursework as well. I direct your attention to Librarian number 6's comment. It might be interesting to do it for an assigned reading or movie as part of the debrief. How applicable this advice will be is up in the air and extremely course dependent. It's kind of unlikely that the large language model will have ingested assigned readings for the class, and we should be cautious to make sure the students actually understand these readings well enough to judge how good the large language model is at interpreting and summarizing them. Because again, the point is they are experts applying it to an analysis. This is also very distracting in a group setting. The earliest iteration of this lesson was set up in pairs, with one expert analyzing with one novice before we decided this is way too unwieldy. Telling the learners to act in general pairs while giving them the same prompts and movies to work off of led to them being more concerned about analyzing the actual random responses and how they differed from each other, more than comparing it with their own critical analysis of the movies. And finally, there was some concern that the students would trust the large language model's answers much more than their own, especially given the long length of some of the prompts and the short time of the lesson. One librarian, though, librarian number 4, did get the feeling I was personally hoping for. Can make finding hallucinations and mistakes feel like an accomplishment rather than a barrier during the lesson. This is exactly what we were looking for, understanding how easy it is to locate these hallucinations, but also empowering the user to take that skeptical stance and begin building more meaningful critiquing skills. So as far as lessons go, this iteration of lesson 2 is much more simple than lesson 1. The learner selects their favorite movie, preferably before 2022, to account for different large language model training windows. The learner then interviews the model with a set of 4 questions, revolving around the model summarizing the movie's plot, themes, the critical reception, and its approach to diversity. At each step, they complete a quick slider to gauge their feelings with shorter, punchier reflection questions as they move through the exercise, to kind of get like their knee-jerk reactions, right? The meat and potatoes of the exercise come from the final reflection, where the learner compares their own feeling of authority with the large language models. We ask them to look for areas where the responses differ significantly from the learner's understanding and submit it in a written format. So these are the mid-lesson reflections that are meant to get the learner's immediate impressions of large language models of capabilities through answering on a slider that ranges from low to high accuracy / matching. How accurate was the summary? Did the themes match your perception? Did the large language model's critical response match your experience with the film? Which is very important for cult classics, you know, those so good it's bad style of films. And finally, did the diversity elements match? At this question, we found the models routinely get tripped up. In Fury Road, however, it did a really decent job pointing out the very diverse cast and themes. Right. And these are the stronger, more in-depth questions we ask at the end of the exercise. As a reminder, these final reflections are on the learner's chosen movie, not necessarily Fury Road. Here we really ask the learners to dig in deep and consider their own thoughts relative to the large language models. We really also try to use this opportunity to bring out the user's feelings of serendipity when working with a large language model. Oftentimes our focus groups are surprised by some of the responses, things they never would have considered. So I know when I was working with Mad Max, I was actually surprised to see physical ability diversity cropping up. Furiosa, one of the main characters, is an amputee. It portrayed very positively. I, however, was focused much more heavily on the extremely feminist bent of the movie. I didn't even consider the physical disability aspect, but it made perfect sense. And I was able to identify a gap in my own critical analysis of the movie. And so what we're going to do right now is we are going to switch to a Mentimeter again for the next one. I'm going to put the link in the chat. What challenges have you faced or do you expect to face when developing AI-focused lessons and activities? This is just kind of like a word cloud, just put down some brief answers. Instructors, vector. Oh, okay, lots of faculty buy-in. Faculty's popping up a lot. Easy access. Time, technical difficulties, fear, AI misuse. Varying expertise. Can't see college policies. Ooh. So yeah, it seems like faculty is a really big one. Yeah, chaos indeed. Chaos indeed, Nancy. All right, Lara.
All right, yeah, great. Thank you, everyone. All right, so some of the lessons we learned in creating these. We learned a lot in this process, from choosing the right frames to getting the tools to effectively meet our learning goals to incorporating our feedback from colleagues. Some of the strengths were the AI Pedagogy Project's LLM tutorial offered a really easy, quick access point for this kind of activity. It was great that there's no sign up or anything like that required. It's very easy for students to jump on. And it's really a great resource anyway to be able to point out to students if they want to learn more about how these tools work. I would certainly encourage them to go through it. As librarian number 2 here pointed out, using a tool from an entity like Harvard also gave the lesson a little bit more of an authoritative punch to it. There were lots of variations and responses, which led to good conversations and a better awareness for how the LLMs work, since some of the librarians participating in our demo had not used them before. Overall, there was a lot of relevant discussion during the activity. And the feeling was that choosing a fun topic also made it an easy introduction to the technology because you could focus on the experience rather than getting caught up in the actual topic itself. There was also a robust post-assessment discussion with colleagues that helped us tweak this activity even more. Just as students used the LLM as a thought partner to better understand their topics, we used our colleagues as our thought partners to help us refine our own ideas and approaches as we went.
One of the largest challenges we encountered during this process was simply designing a good prompt. Prompt engineering as a skill has its detractors, but it was very evident while building these lessons that poorly designed prompt could get very confusing for the students and derail them. The random nature of the program could result in significant deviations from the lesson plan and could leave the students really adrift. As per this quote from librarian number 3, I got decent results from my queries, but I know some others did not. The prompts that we're using now seem to be working, but even these prompts can be tweaked as we continue to iterate and as the tool changes. When we did this, it was not ChatGPT 4.0 like we did the initial demo. We did find that while they worked for us, some of the prompts didn't work for others, so it never hurts to run through this with multiple coworkers and colleagues. Librarians also had some trouble getting useful information from some of these prompts. In lesson 1, Close Encounters of the AI Kind, what made you interested in your topic, which was very important to us, appeared to them as a sort of softball question. It was a little contentious. Some found it useful, some didn't. But when it comes to brainstorming as education professionals, we have to consider that students who are not as familiar with the brainstorming process may find that sort of question really useful to help dig into their topics. And finally, just as a word of caution, websites do go down. If your chosen tool isn't working, have one in your back pocket you can pivot to just in case.
From a pedagogical standpoint, some of the challenges were that the plug and play model means the librarian has to build in or around related activities and learning goals, such as Boolean searching and introduction to discovery tools, etc. The online module does explain the use of quotations, but does not go more granular than that with the search technique, so as to stay focused on the learning outcomes. So this means that it needs to be part of a bigger discussion or activity. Figuring out which frames were the most appropriate and deciding how AI activities supported these outcomes was also a challenge. From a teaching standpoint, we started with the outcomes first, but they seemed to then kind of be forgotten as the activity progressed. And so we realized that we needed to kind of keep reiterating this throughout the lesson and reinforce the actual stated outcomes as part of the interaction. Participants also work at different speeds, so we needed a mechanism to prevent people from jumping ahead. And RJ and I spent a fair amount of time discussing where the reflection should happen. Should they happen at the end? Should they happen in the middle? Is it too disruptive to the overall engagement with the tool? So there was a lot of balance that had to happen there. And ultimately, we took a different approach with each lesson.
Other interesting observations included a split about whether the initial drafts fulfilled the framework or not. Internally, we also found ourselves questioning which frame fit better where and which knowledge practice or disposition fits best. It feels like with generative AI and this, there's some considerable overlap, or at least different interpretation of the frames at play. For instance, the initial goals that led to the creation of lesson 2 could fit scholarship as conversation just as well. The focus group also often suggested switching to asynchronous format or with follow-along demos, as you can see from the quote by Librarian 3. We've taken this to heart by pivoting to the Qualtrics LibGuides plan, especially since they can be configured to incorporate user responses into pre-generated prompts for easy cutting and pasting. While this may be a bit more work, we find it significantly decreases lesson time.
So what's next? We want to continue building out our lessons. So as RJ mentioned, we pivoted to a tool called Qualtrics. So that is a surveying instrument that we have access to here. We also tried LibWizard, both their tutorial and forums feature. Ultimately, we settled on Qualtrics primarily because it is able to pull responses through to the next screen. So it pre-populates the prompts. But this activity could easily be created in any form-based system, Google Forms, Microsoft Forms, etc. We're considering designing it as a LibGuide as another alternative, though we're still in discussion about this. And we're planning to do more testing and considering more feedback to be able to run these through some live class sessions coming up. We'd like to create more lessons in the future to share internally and think about sharing them externally to other sources as well. And the reality of it is when we started working on this, there was still a lot coming out, but there's been so much more shared in this space in the past few months that at this point, we had looked initially at what there was and kind of developed from there. But I think we need to go back and now see what's been kind of developed in tandem to what it is that we're doing and how does this compare and contrast. Okay, so I am going to grab the links here to the lessons to share in the chat because I keep promising you that I will. But that's the end of our presentation. So I'll put the links in a moment. I know there are a few questions. Feel free to put them in the Q&A. And RJ, while I grab these links, can you start us off with the Q&A?
Okay, I'm going to answer Cirrus first. Have you tried Perplexity? How well do you think it might work for this project? We did not try Perplexity. Lara, have you tried that?
Well, I haven't played with it extensively, but Perplexity to me also ties in as a relevant tool to the framework. But for this like thought partner exercise, it has this little bit of a different function than I think what we were looking for. But yeah, I would imagine I have colleagues who've used things like Research Rabbit and Perplexity and those types of tools to develop lessons tied to the framework. And I think there's certainly opportunities there.
Charles Dean, it intrigues me. I refer to the entity as the large language model in contrast to the AI or Maximus or whatever. My thinking behind this choice, this is me mostly doing the large language model. First of all, I say the because I hate saying a LLM or an LLM. It does not flow off my tongue very well. But I do say that because I have opinions about using the term AI for these programs. And I think it gives the wrong kind of feeling for branding because people have different ideas what AI means. So I specify using LLMs to specify generative AI chatbots. Lara, this is going to be more you. What was a platform you used to disseminate the modules? Would it work in Canvas or some other platform?
Yes, I think I touched on this a little bit at the end. I'm sorry, I had to take down the PowerPoint to get those links. Apologies for that quick slide through, everybody. So I think that we use Qualtrics in this case, and we really designed them that an instructor in person could present from the Qualtrics slides if they wanted to, though we also made a corresponding PowerPoint if people preferred that model. But I think this could be adopted to any system. You could certainly use it in something like Canvas or Blackboard or something like that. It's really just a form-based system of responses, walking people through the process and then collecting their feedback from the reflections.
All right. Next question from Kelly. I believe you taught these lessons in face-to-face classes. Just checking. I also wonder if you tried them in online classes or plan to. Was it designed for online? Just curious. So our original intention when we designed this was strictly for in-person. And we tried a hybrid and it did not, it was not efficient hybrid. We have pivoted now away from purely face-to-face or purely hybrid to this Qualtrics LibGuide system, so that you could do either, as Lara has just said. Okay.
And the last question, I can jump in for you if you want, RJ. Also wondering which classes, subjects you introduced these lessons in and which grade level, first year, second year, etc. We have actually not presented these in a class yet. We've been working on developing them and kind of collecting feedback from people as we went. Our hope is to be able to use them in the fall semester, and they were really designed to tie into topics that are already being taught in different ways. So I could certainly see them being used in our first year writing classes. But I think they could also be used in subject focus classes too, depending on what the overall goals are of that particular class. They're meant to be where you can switch out the examples and really make them relevant to those different settings. With regards to what came out of the cloud feedback before with faculty buy-in, I think to me that's the largest component, is figuring out what the faculty members' goals are around AI. And that's the first lesson. The big emphasis on it being the student's thought process, in my mind, is coming from conversations I've had with faculty, that we're not looking for this tool to replace the thinking that's happening by students, but to be used by the students to further their own thinking and having those types of conversations. So
we got some questions in chat for Jenny, actually. Will the links in chat also be shared with the recording?
Yes, so no, they will not. Please go ahead and click on those and save the links right now. If you would like to save them, the recordings will be shared on a different platform. So they will be available most likely within the recording in the Zoom event, but to be sure, we're going to transfer those out and post them elsewhere. So please save them now if you would like them.
What we can also do is we can take the links to our Qualtrics stuff and put them onto our institutional repository. So you see the DOI there. The DOI is going to be on the slide deck. That's and the recording. So you should be able to, we can actually attach things onto there.
well, we'll add a slide in for that link that has the links. I'm realizing that was our oversight. Apologies. And if anyone has feedback on the modules when they go through, I will take any and all feedback. Please feel free to reach out to RJ or myself. We're still iterating on it. So please feel free to test them out, try them out, see what works, doesn't work. We'll gladly take any feedback that you have.
And I see another question here too. Are you going to make the activities available for faculty to use on their own or just for librarians?
I think that's a discussion to be had. So I know we're at time, so I don't want to spend too much time, and I'm happy to follow up afterwards if anyone wants to reach out. But I think that that's a larger discussion on whether or not these would sit only in the library sphere or more widely at the university. I will say we have licensed them with Creative Commons licenses. So the hope is to just post them widely. And so people can use and adapt them, including faculty, however they would like.
Well, please join me in thanking Lara and Arjay very much for this wonderful presentation. And Lara and Arjay, if you'd like to add your contact information in the chat as well, although I also see it right here on the screen. And also, of course, you know, your speaker information is posted on the event page. But if you'd like to add your emails in chat, everyone can get in touch with you with any further questions. And I think we'll all probably be heading out to the next session, but thank you all so much for joining. Thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.